With you, Kurtop, this is 100 Cases When Archaeology Met Mysticism. Where did the Maya go? They left behind amazing jungle cities, step pyramid temples, a complex writing system, and precise astronomical calculations. Their calendars were so precise they continue to spark debate today. By the time the Spanish arrived, only small forest settlements remained of the once great civilization, lacking an army, power, or temples. What happened? Scientists have suggested many theories. The most common cause is environmental disaster. The Maya deforested, depleted the soil, and sparked the revolution. Along with overpopulation and internal conflicts, this may have caused collapse. Epidemics are another theory. Some mention civil wars between cities and states. Even an alien trace is mentioned in conspiracy circles. It's strange that an entire culture vanished, but the Maya did not disappear completely. Descendants of this civilization still live in Guatemala, Mexico, and Belize. They speak Maya languages, preserve traditions, customs, and costumes. The state model known as the Maya civilization collapsed suddenly. Cities were deserted, power vanished, and writing was eventually forgotten. When you look at their stone cities covered in moss, you get the feeling that all this happened quite recently, as if they just went deeper into the jungle and will return someday. Not as a tribe, but as a culture that still has something to say to the world. Salzburg parallelepiped. This artifact was discovered back in 1885 in the Schöndorf coal mine. That's why there are problems with good photographs of it. The artifact is a small metal object with a unique shape, resembling a parallelepiped. It is made of steel with a small amount of nickel. The object weighed just 765 grams, and its dimensions in the photo are 67 by 47 millimeters. Scientists debated the find's origin for a long time, as the rocks where it was found are about 40 years old. After long discussions, it was decided to consider it a meteorite, but not all scientists agreed with this decision. The artifact has too many oddities to just be a meteorite. As a result of the research, it was established that it is made of 3 connecting parts, which indicates its artificial origin. The shape of the find also turned out to be strange, since it is unique for iron meteorites, especially the central groove of perfect shape. People began discussing the artifact again about 50 years ago, and research continues. Studies found no nickel in its composition, ruling out a meteoritic origin. Since then, the find has been lost, with no further news about it. The mysterious aqueduct, Chinglo de Miraflores. When I saw this beauty, my jaw dropped. Could ordinary craftsmen with hammers and chisels have built it? Who lived there then? Given the size of the structure, with only this section of wall left, clearly excavators and multi-ton trucks were involved. By the way, even Spanish language websites have little information about this place. The stone slabs you see in the photos were part of an aqueduct belonging to the old Soto del Puente Canal, in an area known as Cinglo de Mazatrigos. It's a cool place, next to which the Guadalope River flows, carving out profiles and exposing the colorful rocks that make up this area. Red, garnet, gray, or beige. These are some of the colors that show the different geological layers which the waters eroded during the Tertiary and Quaternary periods. Icy ruins beneath snow. Subtitles. We often think of the Arctic as a barren, lifeless place ruled by icy emptiness, with no signs of civilization. But what if that's not the case? What if beneath the thick glaciers, there are not just traces of long-lost peoples, but entire lost cities? Satellite research in recent years has led to the discovery of anomalous shapes beneath the ice crust, which may indicate ancient ruins hidden deep within the north. Some scientists believe these cities may predate the earliest known civilizations. Mesopotamia, Egypt, ancient India, these peoples might have continued something greater and more mysterious than we can imagine. How could that be? How could it happen that such cities are hidden under kilometers thick layers of ice? Today, these anomalies are still just hypotheses, but every new study only deepens the mystery. Satellite images taken in the most remote corners of the planet show strange shapes and lines that resemble the structure of buildings, streets, or even entire cities. Are these glaciers not just barriers, but burial grounds of ancient civilizations, ice caps that conceal not only climate changes, but also forgotten epics of humanity. Amazingly, it's possible that these cities fell victim to global catastrophes that preceded the ice ages. Is anything older than what eternal ice preserves? Scientists are now more concerned with this question than ever. If we uncover the mystery beneath centuries-old ice, we may rethink both our civilization's history and our understanding of the world's development. The mystery of Stonehenge. Stonehenge is a stone riddle that has stood on the Salisbury Plain for over 4,000 years. The giant stones are arranged in a circle with inner and outer rings. Some weigh up to 25 tons and were transported from hundreds of kilometers away. How, why, who did this? Scientists are still debating. Some say it's just a Druid sanctuary, while others believe the complex was built long before the Celts appeared, about 1,000 years earlier. There's also a theory that it was an ancient observatory, since certain stones are indeed aligned with the solstices. But even if that's true, why was such a large scale necessary? The issue is we lack written sources from that time, so we can only guess. One thing stands out: the precise engineering. The stones stood vertically, overlapped by horizontal blocks, creating portals. This requires not only strength, but also knowledge. And after all, this was not a developed city, but essentially a field. No metal, no blueprints, no technology. Strangely, Stonehenge was rebuilt in the 20th century. Some stones were put back in place using cranes, so we still aren't sure which stones are in their original places and which ones have already been moved. This adds even more confusion to an already complicated story. The oldest fossils in Turkey, bovid fossils, which are about 7.5 million years old, were discovered in the central Anatolian province of Kayseri, Turkey. Bovids are a family of hoofed animals, including buffalo, sheep, and goats. Archaeological excavations began near the Chevral district. After the shepherd found the fossil, archaeologists determined that the fossils are unique in Turkey. They are well preserved. Anatolia has rich fossil layers, and due to its location, Kayseri could become a future hub for archaeological discoveries. Archaeologists have already started their work and have discovered amazing things. They determined the fossils are about 7.5 million years old, but research is ongoing. It's still unclear which animal they belong to, perhaps elephants or mammoths. A spring storm caused a coastal cliff to collapse on the Baltic seashore, revealing an ancient ritual. The broken chunk of clay concealed something that would have remained undiscovered without nature's help. It lay underground for nearly 3,000 years, but remained in perfect condition. It is 24 centimeters long, decorated with star ornaments, crescents, and symbols resembling the signs of the sun and moon. According to archaeologists, the weapon had ritual significance. It was possibly used in ceremonies related to the cult of the sun, possibly used in rituals connected to the cult of the sun. It was found on a beach where nothing was predictable, just clay and a crumbling shore. And here is the object, which lay in darkness for 3 millennia, coming into the light for just a few seconds before it could have been carried away by the water. Archaeology isn't always about digging. Sometimes the earth reveals something important on its own. Who were the Sumerians? We often think history starts with Egypt, but if you look deeper, the Sumerians were actually the first great civilization. They built the first cities, invented writing, did complex calculations, studied astronomy, practiced medicine, developed irrigation, and created laws. They seem to be from another time, but who they were still remains a mystery. The Sumerians emerged in southern Mesopotamia in the 4th millennium before Christ. They appeared as a highly organized society with no signs of gradual development, as if they already had advanced knowledge. They had a complex language that is unlike any other. Even related connections with other languages of the world have not been found. So where did they come from? One theory suggests the Sumerians originated in the east, perhaps the mountains of Iran or Pakistan. In their language, the words for country and mountain are the same. This could be a hint. There are also more unusual theories, like the Sumerians gaining knowledge from a lost continent or contact with extraterrestrials. There's no evidence for this, but the mysteries remain. I'm personally surprised by how much knowledge they had. They didn't just build houses, they knew how to reinforce the foundation. They didn't just write, they kept accounting records. They didn't just observe the stars, they predicted lunar eclipses. They were rational, civilized, and yet they disappeared. Eventually, the Sumerians merged with others. Their language vanished, leaving only cuneiform tablets and scattered guesses. Mount Kailas and its mysteries. Mount Kailas, or Kailash, is located in the southern part of the Tibetan plateau of the Trans-Himalaya system and territorially belongs to China. Kailas translates from Tibetan as the precious jewel of snows. Kailas is the highest point in this mountain system, standing 6,638 meters above sea level. Although the data may vary, the difference is only a few dozen meters. 4 of the largest rivers of the Indian subcontinent originate from the slopes of Mount Kailas, the tributaries of the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, the Karnali, and its tributary, the Sutlej. Exploring the mountain is difficult due to its altitude and remoteness. Little is known about Kailas, but the mountain holds many mysteries and unconfirmed theories awaiting discovery. Numerous attempts to conquer the very summit of the mountain have ended in failure. So far, no one has managed to do it. Chinese authorities, the United Nations, and the Dalai Lama denied expeditions permission. Pilgrims protested and blocked the route. Its appearance is already a mystery in itself. Mount Kailash's edges align with the 4 cardinal directions, and some scientists think it's an ancient pyramid with nearby smaller mountains forming a system. Geologists think wind and water shaped its pyramid form over thousands of years, and the mountain itself emerged from the bottom of the ocean as a result of the movement and collision of the Earth's crust being pushed up to the surface. And the cracks on the southern side of the mountain look like a swastika, which in Buddhism symbolizes the highest divine power and perfection. These cracks may have formed due to an earthquake, but Tibet is known for incredible miracles. It seems someone did this intentionally for hidden reasons. Some theories say Mount Kailash, one of the oldest civilizations, is surrounded by myths and legends. This is a renowned pilgrimage site. Hindus believe Kailash is Shiva's sacred mountain, while Buddhists see it as Buddha's palace. Many firmly believe that the mountain is supposedly hollow inside and that the enlightened have found refuge there. To make a full circuit around it, you need to walk a distance of 53 kilometers along the valley at its base. This pilgrimage called Kora began with Tibetan monks. Anyone who completes the Kora even once in their life is freed from karma and all the sins they've committed and can be at peace about their next incarnation. They'll be lucky in their next incarnation. Visitors to Mount Kailash say time there seems to stop. The concentration of powerful energy there can really push a person to realize the meaning of life, helps them understand themselves, and almost feels like it recharges their inner batteries. Subtitles. Where did the Scythians disappear to? The Scythians are one of those peoples that everyone seems to have heard of, but almost no one knows much about. The Greeks described them as wild horsemen from the north, living without cities but skilled in the art of war. Herodotus devoted an entire section of his works to them, and then silence. At some point, the Scythians simply disappear from history. At their peak, they ruled large areas from the Danube to the Altai, traded with Greeks, fought Persians, battled Alexander the Great, and later clashed with Sarmatians and Huns. Their culture was vibrant and unique, golden jewelry, animal style in art, and a special attitude toward death. And suddenly, a break. No chronicles, no clear evidence of what happened to them. Historians believe the Scythians merged with other groups, possibly the Sarmatians, Slavs, or peoples of the Caucasus. Some think Ossetians, Chechens, and Ingush may descend from the Scythians. These are just hypotheses. There's no direct evidence. I'm especially fascinated by their burial mounds. You stand on a hill in the steppe where, thousands of years ago, a chieftain was buried with weapons, gold, and a horse. Everything is neatly arranged, as if the person just left on a long journey instead of dying. You see that not just an army or people vanished, but an entire worldview, powerful, swift, nomadic, with its own logic and truth, disappeared. The mummy of the gnome from San Pedro. Mummified bodies are often discovered and always draw public attention. I've noticed these mummies frequently come with mysteries, sometimes even multiple secrets. San Pedro is one such story we'll discuss. The body was found, in the San Pedro Mountains, Wyoming, United States of America in 1932. Here's how it happened. Two guys named Mayan and Carr were searching for gold in the state, hoping to get rich. The men were doing honest and hard work because finding and extracting gold was not an easy task in those days. Cecil Mayan and Frank Carr weren't having much luck in their endeavors. They were only finding tiny specks of gold dust. As an acquaintance says, don't fear when things are bad. Be cautious when everything seems too good. Luck finally smiled on the men. Carr and Mayan noticed a gold vein in the rock. They needed to use explosives to get to the precious metal. The men blew up the rock. Whether they got the gold or not, history does not say. That's true. Back then, it became very important. Mayan and Carr discovered a small room about 1/2 meter wide and high and 4 to 5 meters long. There was no gold there, and in the room sat a dwarf, somewhat resembling a human. Not alive, of course, it was a mummy. The dwarf was sitting cross-legged, and his height in a standing position must have been about 35 to 40 centimeters. The find was given to scientists who also performed an X-ray exam. It turned out that the dwarf, who was named Pedro after the mountains where he was found, was a human, or at least a humanoid creature. He had a skeleton like ours, internal organs, and so on. However, his spine was damaged, as was one of his collarbones. They determined the approximate time when this creature lived. 1700 AD. Who was Pedro during his lifetime? Consensus on this issue remains elusive. Some believe gold prospectors found a child with anencephaly, while others think it was an adult. Among other things, scientists determined that the creature had 32 teeth in its mouth, which is not typical for children. There is also an extravagant version that Carr and Mayan supposedly found the mummy of a little man. There were legends about these creatures among some Indian tribes. It was said that in the mountains lived small and very evil people who did not like humans. They shoot anyone nearby with poisoned arrows. For a while, Pedro was kept in a pharmacy in Wyoming where the mummy was shown to visitors. Then Pedro was bought by a businessman named Goodman from the same state. According to some reports, the mummy was later resold to a wealthy man from New York named Wadler. No one knows what happened to Pedro after that. It's a pity. It's possible that modern research on biological material could have provided answers to the question of who this Pedro really was. The Giants of Easter Island. Easter Island is a tiny patch of land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, but that's where hundreds of stone giants called moai stand. Their faces are turned toward the island as if they are guarding it. The largest ones reach up to 10 meters in height and weigh up to 80 tons. Most importantly, no one knows how or why they were made. The moai were likely carved by the Rapa Nui people between the 11th and 16th centuries, using stone axes, wooden levers, and ropes. Some scientists tried to replicate this process, and they even succeeded, but only with relatively small statues. What about those that weighed dozens of tons? How were they moved around the island? Since Easter Island lacks trees for strong logs, Tor Heyerdahl suggested the statues were dragged lying down. Another theory suggests they were rocked side to side like a refrigerator on ropes, but questions remain, especially regarding how the statues' pukau hats, weighing up to 2 tons, were placed on top. Lifting them without cranes is almost impossible. There's also another question. Why? Some people believe that these were portraits of ancestors, while others think that the moai symbolize the power of the clan. The island was small with few resources, so why did everyone put their energy into building stone heads? A lonely island without trees, without iron, with mysterious statues that seem to watch you? I can't shake the thought that this was a ritual not for people, but for someone who was supposed to see these statues from the sky or from the sea. A secret known to the CIA. In 2002, declassified CIA documents were made public. One of them was simply called the Report on Noah's Ark. It describes a strange object on Mount Ararat's slope, resembling a massive ship's hull. Rumors about this place have been circulating since the mid-20th century. Here's what's strange. The CIA first used reconnaissance planes, then satellites, all because of this anomaly. According to the official version, nothing special was found in the images, but dozens of requests to publish the footage from 1974 were denied. Why hide the images if there's nothing on them? Later, researchers collected soil samples from this place. They found marine organisms inside, even though Mount Ararat is 4,420 meters high. Does this mean that water really was here, the very same water from the biblical flood? It may look like a coincidence, but there are too many to ignore. People have avoided this place for too long. Memorable marks on the bricks of history. Mehrangarh Fort in Jodhpur is one of the most magnificent structures in India, but behind its beauty lie some dark pages of history. There are still 15 women's handprints on the inner gates of Loha Pole. They are silent witnesses to the tragic sati tradition, a centuries-old Hindu ritual where widows burned on their husband's funeral pyre. Sometimes women did this voluntarily, but more often they were forced. This practice was officially banned by the British in 1829, but in India, it persisted until the 20th century. In 1843, after the death of Maharaja Man Singh, his wives left handprints on the wall before stepping into the fire. However, this isn't the fort's only historical case. In 1731, 6 wives and 58 concubines of Maharaja Ajit Singh also ended their lives in the flames. Tragedy started as soon as the fortress was founded. In the 15th century, the Saint Chidyavali Baba cursed Rao Jodha, declaring that his lands would suffer from eternal droughts. To lift the curse, the king ordered a resident, Rajaram Migwal, to be walled up alive in the fort's walls. But the curse still seems to be in effect. Maharajas have died here, tourists have fallen, and in 2008, a stampede at the Chamunda Devi temple left hundreds dead or injured. Subtitles: Entrance to the Underground Ecosystem. Central Vietnam has a place untouched by science. Sun Dung Cave is the largest on Earth, over 6 kilometers long, with a volume of 38 million cubic meters. To grasp the scale, a whole block of skyscrapers could fit inside. But size isn't the main point. The main thing is that inside this cave there is a separate ecosystem, its own river, lakes, jungles, and stalactites that are dozens of meters long. Plants, insects, microorganisms, many of them may be unknown to science. No light enters. It has its own air, humidity, temperature, and pressure, all contained inside. It's like the planet made its own reserve beyond history. And interestingly, we still don't know where this cave ends. The final point hasn't been explored. Maybe further on, there's another chamber, biospheric bubble, or a separate evolutionary path that developed alongside ours. What caused the Great Migration of peoples? In the 4th and 5th centuries AD, Europe's map starts to fracture as waves of migrants, Visigoths, Huns, Vandals, Alans, and Franks, descend on the Roman Empire. The Great Empire, which had maintained order for centuries, is collapsing right before our eyes. What later will be called the Middle Ages begins, and with it, the Age of Mist. What triggered such a movement of peoples? The official version cites climate cooling, crop failures, population growth, and internal conflicts. The new tribes sought land, resources, and security. Why did everything happen at once across Eurasia? Why did Germans, Slavs, and steppe peoples all begin migrating together? What was the trigger? There is a theory that it all started with the Huns, a warrior people from Central Asia, who, like a chain reaction, pushed other tribes westward. Other researchers believe that it goes deeper. It's possible that an ecological disaster was happening in Asia, causing entire cultures to leave their homelands. There's even a theory that changes in the Earth's magnetic field could have affected migration, and people followed after them. The Romans couldn't withstand the onslaught. Their roads, walls, and legions couldn't stop those who came not so much to fight, but to survive. The empire vanished, replaced by a feudal, religious, and fragmented Europe. But without this migration, there wouldn't be France, Germany, or Russia. We live atop Rome's ruins and the bones of that ancient storm. A miniature modest bird figurine. A miniature bird figurine was discovered in Lingjing, Henan Province, China, dating back 13,500 years. It is now the oldest known example of Chinese art. This is a Paleolithic bird figurine carved from blackened bone. It may not seem impressive, but at about 13,500 years old, it's the oldest 3D art found in East Asia. On its surface, there is evidence of the use of different types of tools, indicating that the artist used well-established carving techniques. It is also unique because the bird is sitting on a pedestal, which suggests that it is part of a previously unknown artistic tradition. A dinosaur egg with an embryo. In 2010, while renovating the Yingling Stone Natural History Museum in Guangzhou, southeastern China, staff sorting collections found fossilized dinosaur eggs. Such discoveries are not uncommon, but many of them are not well preserved. Scientists decided to examine some of the specimens more closely and discovered the skeleton of an embryo inside one of the eggs. The material was collected in 2000 during southeastern China excavations and has been in the museum's collection since then. Inside the egg, which is 16 millimeters long, lies the embryo of an ovire Aptorosaurus. These theropod dinosaurs lived in the Cretaceous period in present-day Asia and the Americas. They were feathered, toothless, and had jaws covered by a horny Rhamphotheca. The find is estimated to be 66-72 million years old and was named baby Yinliang. The embryo is 27 centimeters long. The little dinosaur likely had just days before hatching but died, possibly from a landslide. The embryo's position is distinctive: hind limbs on the sides, head pressed to the front of the body, and back curved along the egg's blunt end. This pose is very similar to that one. The embryos of modern birds before hatching. The chick tucks its head under its forelimb. This shows that some developmental patterns seen in modern birds already existed in ancient forms, like Oviraptorosaurs. Currently, the study of the find continues using modern scanning and visualization tools. To be continued, the death of Alexander. Alexander the Great conquered half the world by age 30, leading his army from Greece to India. He never lost a battle, destroyed empires, and built new ones. But in 323 before Christ, at the height of his power, he suddenly dies in Babylon. He is only 32 years old. What happened? Many theories exist. Persians blame punishment for desecrating King Cyrus's tomb, while Macedonians said he overexerted himself. Drunkenness, illness, and exhaustion. Roman historians suspected poisoning. There is a theory that it was malaria, West Nile fever, or an autoimmune disease or a slow-acting poison brought from the east. But the biggest question is not the cause of death, but what happened afterward. Where is his body? According to one version, the sarcophagus was taken to Egypt. According to another, it never made it there. After that, the trail is lost. No tomb, inscription, or official burial. An almost impossible absurdity in the ancient world. Someone like that deserved to be deified, but instead, there's only silence. Some believe the body was intentionally hidden to avoid fueling a cult or legitimizing the heirs. Or maybe his death was a conspiracy, and someone wanted to erase all traces. Sometimes the most chilling secret isn't how someone lived, but how they died. Alexander left behind a namesake city and a myth. No marker remains, no cross, mausoleum, just speculation. And that makes his death even more legendary and unsettling. King or demon? At the Museum of Knightly Arms in Leeds, there's a strange artifact clearly not meant for battle. It has horns, a toothy grin, and a bristly chin. It looks more like a jester's mask than a warrior's helmet. However, documents say this helmet belonged to Henry VIII, the powerful and controversial English monarch. The helmet was from a suit of armor gifted by Emperor Maximilian I to honor the military alliance. It was made by the famous armorer Sossenhofer, and the engraving was done by a jeweler from Augsburg. This wasn't a sideshow, it was an official custom-made gift, crafted with top-level skill. Why would a king need such a face? Theories range from ceremonial display to esoteric symbolism. Maybe it's an allegory, a demon that power becomes, or maybe it's just a specific sense of humor. Interestingly, all the armor vanished except for this helmet. Maybe it survived for centuries because of its strange, frightening look. The treasures of the Templars. The Templars were not just knights. They were a financial empire of the Middle Ages. They had castles, ships, a treasury, their own banks, and even their own transfer system. The French king, Philippe IV, owed them a huge sum, and then suddenly he declared the order outlawed. They are arrested, tried, tortured, and their treasures vanish. When the Templar Paris headquarters was seized, no valuables, gold, artifacts, or documents were found. The empty treasury sparked panic and rumors. How did this happen? Where is everything? A few hours before the raid, a caravan reportedly left Paris with the gold for La Rochelle's port, where ships took it to an unknown location. Since then, one of history's most persistent quests began: finding the Templar gold. Some seek it in Scotland, others on Oak Island in Canada, where a hidden trap-filled cache was supposedly built. Some say the treasures were taken to Switzerland and became the basis for the future banking system. Some believe the gold was hidden in Jerusalem and is still guarded today. We don't even know the estimated loss. Given the order's scale, it could be thousands of kilograms of gold. Relics, documents, or political secrets, all vanished instantly without a trace. Personally, I think this is not just a story about treasures, it's a story about a power that became too independent and was destroyed. The gold vanished along with the influence. Maybe it's still at work, just controlled by others. He dug a tunnel for 38 years. He made a passage over 2 kilometers long, and all the locals thought he was crazy. It turned out it wasn't that simple. William Schmidt, known as Mole, lived in a small mining town near Mount El Paso in the Mojave Desert, where gold was plentiful among scorpions, sand, and rattlesnakes. The locals were the ones mining it. Everyone except Schmidt. This odd little man came to Mount El Paso every day and dug his own tunnel, every day year-round with no breaks. When asked why, William replied, "This is the shortest way. You'll understand soon." This pace continued for nearly 40 years, during which Schmidt was buried by rock multiple times and nearly died. After one incident, he grew concerned about safety and reinforced the tunnel walls, though it took considerable time. He even laid rails to remove the rock and kept working hard. People first mocked him, then called him crazy, and eventually left him alone. The locals had their own things to do. They only occasionally whispered and came up with theories about how this strange man made a living and how he bought his tools. One day, Schmidt didn't return to town. A few days later, the townspeople set out to discover where he had gone. The sheriff led them through the dark, gloomy, and slightly creepy tunnel. After walking several hundred meters, they gave up and returned to the surface. Schmidt was listed as missing, and they forgot about the strange man. Until recently, no one else had gone down into the tunnel. Only new professional explorers decided to go through this passage and were amazed. It wound under the mountain for 2,048 meters, all completed by one person. No remains were found, but a clear gold vein was visible on the tunnel walls. The digger likely found gold, mined the vein completely, and vanished. And then Schmidt's new answer about the shortest path became clear. It turned out that it was the path to wealth. The disappearance of Atlantis. Atlantis is not just an ancient legend, it's a cultural phantom that still influences minds, dreams, and even science. Plato described it in remarkable detail: a large island with an advanced civilization, strong army, and intricate canal system. He said Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, across from the Atlas Mountains, and sank in one day due to a massive earthquake around 9,500 before Christ. More than 11,000 years have passed since then, and we are still searching for it on Crete and Santorini in Cuba and Brazil and Iceland, and at the bottom of the Atlantic. Scientists have suggested many theories, from the disaster on Thera to a misremembered sunken section of the Sahara. The problem is that we don't have a single direct piece of archaeological evidence. No artifacts, no remains, no genetic trace. But science also can't fully disprove Atlantis' existence. What's strange is the extent of its influence. The legend of Atlantis inspired philosophical schools, occult theories, Nazi mystics, pseudosciences, conspiracy theorists, and science fiction writers. Atlantis symbolizes a lost golden age, drawing us in as it represents the idea that we were once more than we are now. Sometimes I think that Atlantis isn't a sunken island, but a reflection of our dream. We want to believe that people were once stronger, smarter, better, and until we learn the truth, this story will keep resurfacing again and again. The House of the Golden Bracelet. These are ancient Roman cities, buried during the volcanic eruption in 79 AD, which have provided scientists with a wealth of information about the lives of Romans in the 1st century AD. The House of the Golden Bracelet is a real multi-story city villa with numerous rooms and panoramic terraces overlooking the sea. With a garden vineyard and costly decoration, much of this beautiful decor has survived to today despite the disaster. Frescoes, mosaics, marble inlay, terracotta reliefs, and individual finds. Some frescoes crumbled with the plaster. The restorers had to work very hard to reconstruct their original appearance. The house was likely damaged in the earthquake 17 years before Vesuvius erupted, with some rooms under repair for years. The saddest discovery for archaeologists in this estate was the remains of an entire group of people, consisting of 2 small children and 2 adults. With the help of plaster, it was possible to restore the volume of their bodies at the moment of their death. One adult wore a preserved gold bracelet weighing up to 610 grams. The basis of its design was a long, fairly common motif in ancient Roman jewelry art. 2 snake heads face each other, both holding a head in their jaws. A large disc with an image of the moon goddess Selene. She is holding a crescent above her head by its ends, and the space between them is decorated with stars. After this bracelet was discovered in 1974, archaeologists named the house after it. The ornament indicates the high social status of the woman to whom it belonged. But that's not all. The woman from Pompeii carried a box with gold aurae and 180 silver denarii. Archaeologists say 20 denarii was sufficient. A family of 3 could dine in Pompeii for a whole week. The people stayed forever in the corridor from the house to the garden. They thought it meant salvation, but decided to leave the building too late. The inhabitants of the House of the Golden Bracelet perished under the collapsed balcony of the upper floor. Because gender can't always be identified from Pompeian casts, 50 years ago, they decided to classify anyone wearing a bracelet as a woman. The group was believed to be a family, parents and 2 young children. But now there is reason to believe that none of these people were related to each other. The men, 1 older, 1 younger, and 2 boys, about 5-6 years old and around 3 years old. Research on these casts is ongoing, and perhaps new discoveries await us. The King's Gold. By early 20th century, the Russian Empire held the world's largest gold reserve, over 1,300 tons, stored in bars, coins, state vaults, and the imperial treasury. After the revolution, it all vanished, straight from the Romanovs' hands into oblivion. Where did the gold go? Some treasures are believed to have ended up with Kolchak, the White Army admiral. He moved the gold by train across Siberia to use it against the Bolsheviks. But then, total confusion begins. One train was cut off by the Reds, another was stopped by the Japanese, a third was looted by the Czechoslovaks, and it's not even clear if there was a 4th one at all. Some funds went to banks in Japan, China, and France, but most, hundreds of tons, disappeared. One version claims the gold was hidden in the Siberian mountains and remains in the taiga. Another says it was taken abroad via Vladivostok and sold secretly. A third suggests it vanished during the Civil War in shadowy dealings. Interestingly, since then, new information keeps appearing in Russia. Someone finds a map, then there are eyewitness accounts, or supposedly a stash is uncovered. But there has never been any official confirmation. The Tsar's gold is now a national phantom. I'm amazed at how billions just disappear, literally without a trace. And not in ancient times, but just 100 years ago. We know who ruled, what he ate for breakfast, and what decrees he signed, but not where the metal that unified the empire is stored. A girl was infected with a medieval curse. Do you think it's possible in the modern world to literally end up in the Middle Ages? And I'm not talking about a reenactment festival, but about a truly terrifying phenomenon. In the Middle Ages, people suffered from a mysterious disease, St. Anthony's fire, also known as witches' convulsions. The symptoms were terrifying: convulsions, bloody vomiting, psychosis, and in severe cases, gangrene of the limbs. The infected were often seen as demon-possessed. The real cause was simple: ergot poisoning, a fungus that infects rye. Bred from tainted grain, triggered mass epidemics in Europe and Russia. The last major case was recorded in 1951 in France, when 250 people fell ill and 4 died. The disease seemed gone, but recently, an American girl experienced severe burning in her legs. Doctors were puzzled. Tissue in her limb began to die. Only after lengthy research did it turn out that she had been poisoned by ergot. She had caught a real greeting from the Middle Ages. Modern technology has nearly ended such cases, but history can still repeat itself. A man out of time. Michel Serre became a pioneer in the study of time and the workings of the human mind. His experiments amazed scientists so much that even National Aeronautics and Space Administration used their results. In 1962, 23-year-old Serre spent 2 months in complete isolation in a cave, giving up clocks and sunlight. He wanted to find out how the body perceives time without external cues. It turned out that a person in an unfamiliar 24-hour cycle switches to 48-hour rhythms, and time feels different. 5 minutes seem like 2. A decade later, he repeated the experiment, spending 6 months in a Texas cave. His discoveries laid the groundwork for chronobiology and helped prepare astronauts for extended missions. Mass poisoning with ergot in ancient times. Researchers from the University of Seville studied cases of mass ergot poisoning in the past era. Today, some types of liquid metal, which can be harmful to health, are seen as among the world's most dangerous substances. However, our ancestors did not know about this. A group of specialists led by Stephen Emsley analyzed 370 ancient burials at 23 sites in Spain and Portugal. The collected data covers 5,000 years from the Neolithic to ancient times. A small number of poisonings occurred during the Bronze Age when people widely used oxygen. Cinnabar is mercury sulfide that, when ground, makes a bright red powder and was used as a pigment in paints. It covered decorative objects, ritual tools, and even the deceased, including in their hair. Because of storage, scientists recorded an abnormally high amount of mercury, 400 parts per million instead of the usual 2. According to archaeologists, shortly before their deaths, these people might have inhaled mercury vapors or ingested it. Cinnabar for esoteric purposes. Cinnabar. Great Flood, myth or disaster? The story of the Great Flood is one of the most universal in world culture. It is known not only from the Bible, where Noah builds the ark, but also from the Sumerian epic of Ziusudra, the Babylonian story of Utnapishtim, the Indian myth of Manu, the Greek tale of Deucalion, Chinese chronicles, legends of Native Americans, and even Arctic tales. Such a coincidence seems unlikely to be accidental. It raises the question, did the flood actually occur? And if so, when? One of the most convincing hypotheses refers to events that took place 7,600 years ago. At that time, due to a sharp rise in the level of the world ocean, salty water rushed through the Bosporus into the Black Sea lowland. Geologists claim that the water level rose by 140 meters, flooding vast areas. What used to be fertile land became the sea. This event could really have seemed like the end of the world for people of that era. But was it a global flood? Probably not. But for those living on coastal lowland river floodplains, it was a global catastrophe. Imagine water sweeping away your home, livestock, land, and ancestral village. People flee on rafts to the mountains. Centuries later, the event's memory becomes a universal, terrifying myth. I'm amazed this ancient fear still lives in us. Even in the 21st century, we're afraid of floods. We talk about climate catastrophe as if we genetically remember how the world once really drowned. And maybe it's not just a myth, it's a warning. The horse's head from an ancient Roman statue, the sculpted horse's head, and other discoveries suggest that the Romans had remarkable relationships with the tribes living along the northern borders of the Roman Empire. In 2009, archaeologists found a 2,000-year-old Roman horse's head at Lochnau Farm in Germany. Now, almost 10 years later, the court has concluded that the farmer who owned the land deserves compensation. The well-preserved artifact was thrown into a 36-foot well submerged and shielded from air. Initially, the state paid the farmer only $56,000 for the head found on the land that was his property. In July, the Limburg District Court ruled the farmer is entitled to half the antiquity's value, totaling $1.8 million. The local authorities now owe the farmer a total of $904,000 plus interest. Archaeologists think the bronze head was left behind after an invasion forced residents to flee quickly. The head, adorned with golden leaves, was dated to the 9th year AD, The artifact found in a German city shows the vastness of the Roman Empire. Experts first thought the head belonged to a Roman general's statue. Nearby, they found sandals confirming that the horse originally had a rider. The head, made of bronze and covered with gold, is more than just an impressive example of Roman art. King Arthur is a myth on the throne. People have been writing about him since the 12th century. There are movies about him, novels, and comic books. King Arthur is a near mythical figure. The Round Table, Sword in the Stone, Merlin, Camelot. But behind these legends, the main question remains, was he real? Historians still debate it. Some believe that Arthur is a composite figure, a leader of Celtic resistance against the Anglo-Saxons, about whom a heroic epic was composed centuries later. Others are convinced that he is a completely fictional character, a literary construct. The problem is that sources about him appear too late. References to his life appear 300 to 400 years after his supposed era. There are theories that the prototype of Arthur was a Roman military leader who stayed in Britain after the legions left. Some suggest a link to Ambrosius Aurelianus, but there's no direct evidence, no grave chronicles, or reliable contemporary accounts. What's interesting is something else. In the legends about Arthur, almost everything is about morality, about duty, honor, truth, and the fight for justice. He's not just a king, he's the idea of what a king should be. Maybe that's why the image of Arthur is so enduring, because it's not about a specific person, but about what we all lack. It's a story you won't find in textbooks. Not long ago, archaeologists found evidence that in ancient Troy, long before the Iliad was written, people were already drinking wine. This is not just a theory or a guess, but real chemical evidence that confirmed that even ordinary people in the territory of Troy not only drank wine, but also used it in their everyday lives. For researchers, this was sensational, as wine in ancient times was usually reserved for the elite, but in Troy, it was accessible to all social classes. Research shows the wine cult in Five was so important to Troy's inhabitants that drinking vessels were found citywide, from palaces to simple homes. But what's even more interesting is that the fermentation method used in Troy was so unique that it resembled those of more complex and advanced civilizations of that time. And now, thanks to these studies, we can confidently say that Troy was not just a legend, it was real, and its culture was much more complex and progressive than we could have imagined. The tomb that someone tried to steal. Summer 2023, Abkhazia, Markul settlement. An ordinary plot of land and a ruined ancient crypt. It was broken into by looters. The robbers tried to take the bronze situla, but they were caught on the spot. The landowner took the artifact and called archaeologists. Their discovery amazed even the most experienced specialists. The 3rd century before Christ's crypt proved to be a true golden tomb. 70 items made of pure gold, plaques, beads, elements of clothing and jewelry, rosettes, flowers, lunulae, twisted threads, and foil. The craftsmanship is exquisite, showing jeweler-like precision. In some areas, the gold resembled the Scytho-Sarmatian style, with some ancient influences. This may be the work of local craftsmen at the intersection of cultures and trade routes. Archaeologists also found remains of sacrificial animals, evidence of a ritual for burying a noble. The artifacts, bones, glass beads, bronze bracelets, show the buried person was elite, possibly a priest or chief, not just wealthy. Ironically, the crypt was destroyed not by time or nature, but by people like those who built it. The plague in its route. In the 14th century, Europe is gripped by terror as the Black Death spreads rapidly. Thousands die. Doctors wear beaked masks, families vanish in days, and no one understands why. Today we know it was the plague. But even with modern knowledge, questions remain. Why did it strike almost exactly along the same routes as the Justinian pandemic 1,000 years earlier? Why did outbreaks happen at the same time in London, Moscow, and Paris? How could it spread so fast when travel in the Middle Ages was so slow? The usual culprit is said to be the black rat flea. It carried the Yersinia pestis bacteria, but the range of wild rats did not cover all of northern Europe. And most importantly, these rodents, in theory, couldn't have appeared in dozens of cities at once. Some scientists think it wasn't the rats, but the air, climate changes, humidity, and dust waves that may have spread the disease. There is also a theory that the disease spread faster not because of biology, but because of psychology. Panic, mass exodus, fleeing. Infected people unknowingly carried death as they moved to new places. So, the epidemic spread like a network, igniting in multiple places at once like sparks on dry grass. What scares me isn't the disease itself, but how it keeps repeating. We believe everything has changed since then. Medicine, hygiene, science, but pandemics still outpace common sense. Maybe it's not just about germs. Maybe it's a mirror of society, a vulnerable system. Whenever we start to forget, something reminds us. The past is nearer than it appears. Rare structures in the ancient city of Delici. Archaeologists have studied a rare occupation structure in southeastern Turkey from the Roman Empire era and a magnificent Christian basilica from late antiquity. Wars and economic crises caused people to abandon the city. Under Christian patronage, a new period of prosperity began and a basilica was built. The city first gained attention and wealth from the sanctuary of Jupiter Dalicinus, later becoming a bishopric. Archaeologists have conducted research since 2001. Ancient Dalic perfectly illustrates the cultural, political, and religious growth of a city in ancient Syria. The city first changed when it joined the Roman Empire. The bathhouse illustrates how Roman customs shaped the cityscape. The bathing facilities were quite large, covering an area of about 2,000 square meters. The bathhouse has a layout typical of Roman times. First come the cold baths, then the warm and hot baths. Currently, a room of about 150 square meters with a pool is open as well as part of the underfloor heating system. The finds, such as the mosaics, date the site to the 2nd-3rd century AD when the bathhouse declined during Christianization. Building materials made of lime and marble were processed in a large lime kiln and then used for new constructions. The church's discovery is significant, as few city churches here have been studied by archaeologists, making it important for early Christianity research. The findings discovered around the church indicate that it was destroyed by an earthquake that occurred in the 7th century. The city itself was finally abandoned in the 12th century, the city that should not exist. Amid sun-scorched southern Iraq, the ruins of Eridu remain. Once canals flowed here, craftsmen worked, and the fields were irrigated according to a precisely calculated system. Recent studies have shown that Eridu is not just an ancient city. It may be the very first city on Earth. According to satellite data, archaeologists have found more than 4,000 canals and about 700 farms, arranged in a strictly organized pattern. The canals are up to 9 kilometers long, with a branched irrigation network and infrastructure that scattered tribes could not have built. This required engineers, workers, and a management system. All this existed millennia before the Sumerians, Egyptians, and Akkadians. Strangely enough, the region was abandoned, which is why this entire ancient system has been preserved almost untouched. It's as if our modern city was buried in ash and discovered fully intact 6,000 years later. Eridu is mentioned in the Sumerian king list as the first city to which kingship was granted from heaven. When myth coincides with geodesy, it gets a little unsettling. A rare giant book. In front of you is one of the 12 giant books from the 18th century, written in Spanish. Its size is impressive, almost a meter in length. These books were created for religious ceremonies and contain detailed scripts of worship services. Leather binding, wooden covers, pages made from tanned animal skin. This made the book durable and a symbol of grandeur in the church. Such manuscripts were intended for use in temples, where clergy and the choir could read the text from afar. That's why the letters are so large. Today, this rarity is preserved at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, where restoration scientists study it to maintain its original form. These books are a real window into the past, allowing us to see what liturgical texts looked like and what the attitude toward writing was in the era of colonial Latin America. A mineral that no longer exists. This stone weighs only 1.6 carats, but its value is literally beyond estimation. Kiatuate, Earth's rarest mineral, was accidentally found at a market in Myanmar. Scientists have found that its composition and crystal lattice are not found anywhere else in nature. In fact, not before or after. The color is amber brown, and the structure is like that of an alien object. Under a microscope, there are hollow tubes inside, formed by pressure and time. Today, Kiautuit is kept in the Los Angeles Museum. It's not just a stone, it's a freak of nature and possibly a trace of an ancient geological event that science doesn't even suspect yet. But what if this mineral is not just a coincidence of nature, but something deeper? What if its composition hides answers to questions we haven't even asked yet? Where was the cradle of the Indo-Europeans? We speak Indo-European languages, most of the languages of Europe, Iran, and India. It's one huge family. They have a common root. But where was the original cradle from which the ancestors of the Slavs, Celts, Greeks, Indians, and Germans dispersed? It was once thought everything began in India, which is why the term Indo-European was used. However, scientists later noticed India had few language branches, while Eastern Europe's steppes had much more linguistic diversity. This is called a distribution center, has more variations closer to the source. Today, the steppe hypothesis is among the most accepted theories. It states that Indo-Europeans emerged around 4,500 years ago in southern Russia and Ukraine, near the Yamnaya culture area. These were nomads who knew how to tame horses, used wagons, and worked with metal. They moved west into Europe and east into Asia, bringing words, culture, technology, and customs. And yet, despite archaeology, linguistics, and genetics, we don't have a single answer. The Anatolian hypothesis places the homeland in Asia Minor, while other theories suggest Iran or even the Balkans. What strikes me about this topic is how easily we lose the threads of our origins. We know where the iPhone came from, but we don't know where the word mother came from. We can explain 19th century colonization in detail, but we can't be certain about the origins of words spoken by billions today. Maybe the question isn't exactly where this cradle was, but why we lost it and why we're still trying to find ourselves in language. 1,000 teeth instead of treasures. The discovery of 1,000 teeth instead of treasures couldn't disappoint the archaeologists. Also, the excavation sites don't indicate the discovery of remarkable artifacts. Excavations in Melbourne's Central Business District, near the Yan and Jackson pub on Swanston Street, reveal new archaeological finds daily, shedding light on our ancestors' history. Now we know that some of them had terrible teeth and some smoked opium in glass bongs made from beer bottles. This place was once home to one of the earliest girls' schools, the Nicola Cook Roxburgh Female Seminary, the Freemason Hotel, and Powell's Hardware Store. There used to be several dentists working here, so they found 1,000 teeth in the pipes in the ground. The most prominent dentist was J. Forster. Newspaper ads praised Forster for being able to extract teeth painlessly. But in 2018, Associate Professor of the Melbourne University Dental School, Mark Evans, is quite skeptical about this. The medicines of those years were not as reliable or couldn't have a lasting effect like today's lidocaine and articaine. There was no paracetamol or ibuprofen to relieve pain after extraction, and there were no antibiotics to fight infection. Dentists often skipped anesthesia for fillings and used a pedal-powered vibrating drill. It was awful. Dr. Evans identified the teeth for the archaeologists. He noted that many of the teeth had huge cavities that had been painful for years. The road through the ash, southern Italy. While building a gas pipeline, an excavator uncovers strange finds beneath volcanic ash, bare human footprints and nearby hoof prints. Archaeologists rush to the site and realize they are looking at scenes of an ancient escape. Men, women, children, and livestock were all leaving their homes in a hurry. But this isn't Pompeii. It's not the year 79 AD. These traces date to about 1995 before Christ, 1,800 years earlier, years before our era. The so-called Avalon eruption, one of the most devastating cataclysms of the Bronze Age. Before this, it was believed that almost nothing was known about it. Now we can literally see the route of the people who tried to escape. Their final choice is captured in the hardened ash. Amazingly, centuries later, people settled in the same place again. Archaeologists have found remains of settlements dating back to 1,200 to 1,900 before Christ and even Roman structures. The cycle repeats: eruption, then return, as if Earth won't let us forget. This is not just a story of disaster. It's about repeated mistakes, about the stubbornness of human hope, about memory that, like ash, still remains underfoot. The scariest tribe. Travel blogger Daniel Pinto caused a real shock by publishing a video with the Vietnamese tribe from Papua New Guinea. In the video, which has gathered over 17 million views, he shows a meeting with the silent members of the tribe guarding the sacred waterfall. The Vietnamese people are dressed in costumes made of mud and clay, and their masks resemble spirit birds with long noses and fierce expressions. They guard the waterfall from outsiders and are intimidating, but viewers question the video's length. Some commenters claim that the scariest tribe would never let a blogger get so close. Others joke that their costumes look like fashionable outfits. Despite debates, the video drew tourists to the region. Now, travel agencies mention Vietnamese as a tourist destination, offering guests eco-lodges and an introduction to the tribe's culture. And what do you think? Is this tribe real or just another way to attract naive tourists? Share your opinion in the video comments below. The first mammoth that might come back. Yakutia's permafrost preserved the mammoth's body as if it were just removed from a refrigerator. Yucca is not just a mummified corpse. It has preserved its brain, soft tissues, glands, and most importantly, living cell nuclei. Scientists have completed initial experiments by implanting nuclei into a mouse cell, which then showed activity. There hasn't been any cell division yet, but this is just the beginning. Cloning is being seriously discussed. If the technology works, the mammoth could be the first species to come back from extinction. It sounds like science fiction, but it's no longer fiction. This is a working laboratory. The disappearance of the 10 tribes of Israel is one of the most mysterious and least discussed topics in history. At the end of the 8th century, before Christ, almost the entire ancient Israelite state disappeared. The Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, causing 10 of the 12 tribes to vanish, about 5/6 of the people. Where did they go? Historical records say the Assyrians relocated the Israelites to Mesopotamia, now parts of Iran and Afghanistan, after the conquest. At this point, the trail goes cold and the people vanished from history. More than 2,000 years have passed, and during this time they became something of a myth. They were searched for worldwide in India, Iraq, and the Caucasus. In Japan, there is even a movement called Makuya, whose followers are convinced that the Japanese imperial family has Jewish origins. They say the word Mikado comes from Migadol, meaning great. Some see the Afghan Pashtuns as descendants of the Israelites, while others see them in the Native Americans of North America. None of these theories has been recognized. There's no proven genetic link, written proof, or archaeological evidence, only legend and the hope of finding those who left and never returned. A ring showing the oldest image of Christ. The Israel Antiquities Authority conducted an archaeological study of 2 ancient sunken ship remains. One is from the late Roman period, about 1,700 years old, and the other is from the Mamluk period, about 600 years old. Many artifacts were found at the shipwreck site in Caesarea, but one of them is especially interesting. It is a gold ring with an inlaid green stone on which an image of a shepherd boy is carved. The boy is carrying a lamb on his shoulders. Experts confirm early Christian images of Jesus the Good Shepherd look just like this. Judging by its size, the ring belonged to a woman. Employees of the Israel Antiquities Authority called it a very rare find. The ship sank in shallow water at the port entrance and now rest at just 4 meters deep. On the seabed, archaeologists discovered more than 500 silver coins from the Mamluk period and hundreds of bronze and silver coins dating back to the ancient Roman period. Also, figurines shaped like an eagle and a comic-masked actor. In addition, bronze nails, a damaged iron anchor, lead pipes, ceramics, and bronze bells that were meant to ward off evil spirits were found. But the octagonal gold ring with the image of the Good Shepherd is considered the most exquisite artifact in this collection. According to the New Testament, it was in Caesarea, where one of the first Christian communities was located, that the Apostle Peter baptized the Roman centurion Cornelius. This marked the first time a non-Jew became a Christian, signaling the start of Christianity's spread. Ancient city described by Homer. Archaeologists found a Hellenistic sanctuary with an inscription linked to the city in Homer's Iliad. The Greek Ministry of Culture said excavations took place near Agiocampos port. The team of scientists discovered Hellenistic period structures that were built from alabaster and local sources of stone. The find dates to the 3rd or 2nd century before Christ. The site is located near the foot of Mount Mavrovuni, stretching to the rocky shores of the northern Aegean Sea. The team discovered many architectural elements, including an entablature, a horizontal structure above the colonnade, 5 Doric capitals, a statue base, parts of a column, a marble leg, benches, as well as 2 marble heads depicting children. Other finds included iron nails, arrowheads, Thessalian and Macedonian bronze coins, bronze rings, clay lamps, drinking vessels, and amphora fragments. The scientists also found tiles with the names of the owners of ceramic shops. The most notable discovery was a tile inscribed with text possibly linked to Meliboea, an ancient city in Polis. Archaeologists believe they found the ancient city of Meliboea, mentioned by Homer in the Iliad's 2nd song, the Catalogue of Ships. In this passage, the poet listed all the Greek cities involved in the campaign against Troy during Agamemnon's reign. This city was also mentioned by other ancient Greek writers in later works. However, information about its exact location is currently lacking. Who found America before Columbus? Hearing about America's discovery, we almost instantly recall 1,492 in Columbus's ships. However, it's increasingly argued that Europeans, especially the Vikings, visited the New World long before him. The main character of this alternative history is Bjarni Herjolfsson, a Scandinavian merchant. At the end of the 10th century, a storm blew him off course, and he claimed to see green land to the west. He didn't land there, but he told others about it. A few years later, Leif Erikson, Eric the Red's son, journeyed and discovered Vinland. This was likely part of the Canadian coast. In 1960, remains of a Scandinavian settlement, including a house and a smithy for making nails, were found at Lonso Meadows in Newfoundland. The evidence is direct, yet official history ignored it for a long time. Why? Perhaps because it's more convenient when a discovery is associated with a single date and a single hero, rather than a sailor's mistake in an abandoned village. But the mysteries don't end there. Some believe the Phoenicians, Basques, Celts, and Chinese reached America before the Vikings, but the evidence is doubtful. Only the Viking story is solid, though it's still considered secondary. Like, yes, they were there, but it didn't make any difference. 4 Roman horseshoes. Early Roman horseshoes found during the excavations at a fort near Hadrian's Wall will be displayed in the museum. The curator of Vindolanda, located near Hexham in Northumberland, Barbara Burley noted that it is incredibly rare to find a complete set of 4 iron horseshoes used by the Romans. The hoof protectors are so well preserved that the anti-slip tread is still visible. With Romans in Britain for 400 and 500 years, archaeologists could dig for 150 more years and still uncover Roman treasures. During the years the Romans were in Britain, they built 9 forts at this site. Every time new Roman troops arrived, they covered the remains of the previous fort with clay to create a solid foundation for their own fort. That's why everything was well preserved. One horseshoe broke, so the set was discarded in the ditch. The horseshoes were dated to 140. 180 AD, when the Sahara was an ocean, now it seems lifeless. Endless sand, sun-scorched rocks, and rare caravans. But once, millions of years ago, the Sahara was completely different. It was an ocean. The warm Tethys Ocean teemed with ancient creatures like ammonites, sea urchins, corals, and giant reptiles, now replaced by lizards struggling to survive. Geologists found traces of deltas, riverbeds, and shorelines, everything that tells the story. Water once splashed here, but when the ocean vanished, a new story began. Hundreds of thousands of years later, people settled on this land, some of the most ancient, whose name still echoes through the sands. The Berbers, or as they call themselves, the Amazigh. the descendants of those who survived climate change, the disappearance of rivers, and the drying up of lakes. They stayed when others left. Their rock paintings in Tassili Nature are a true library of prehistoric consciousness. People hunting with bows, festivals, scenes of love and war, even images of beings with rounded helmets, as if from another reality. Some think it's an allegory. Others consider it proof of contact with another intelligence. The essence remains. Before the Sahara emerged, the Berbers already told their stories and knew where to find water, how to survive hot days and cold nights. They ruled Numidia, traded with Rome, fought with Egypt, and then disappeared from the map, but not from the earth. The Arab conquests forced them from cities to desert and mountains, yet their culture survived. In remote villages, the Berber language is still spoken, preserving a memory thousands of years old. Traces of a much older past still exist in the desert. Stone mushrooms. At first glance, they're just rocks, but if you look closely, their shape is striking. A large, hard stone cap sits on a thin, eroded stem. These formations result from differential erosion. Wind-blown sand erodes soft rocks over years, leaving hard rocks behind. Each of these mushrooms is like a marker of time, temporary but proud. Their stems thin over time, causing one cap to collapse. They live for hundreds of thousands of years, yet remain doomed like the ocean and civilization. Only memory in stones, pollen, and sand endures all. Are there any other traces of this ancient civilization left? And what can they tell us about a past that we still don't understand? Forgotten rulers of Egypt. Most of us consider Egypt an eternal civilization, strong, proud, and independent. But there was a time when it was ruled by outsiders. They were called the Hyksos. This word means rulers of foreign lands or shepherd kings. Who they really were is still a matter of debate. The Hyksos invaded Egypt in the 17th century before Christ. They not only destroyed the country, but also subjugated it, founded a dynasty, ruled nearly a century, and introduced new technologies. It is believed that they were the ones who brought the war chariot to Egypt. This changed the entire strategy of warfare in the Middle East. There is also evidence that the Hyksos were the first to actively use bronze and composite weapons in Egyptian territory. Where did they come from? It's a mystery. Some believe they came from Canaan, the modern Levant. Others think they were nomadic tribes from Asia. Some researchers suggest that the Hyksos were a mixture of different peoples. Traders, warriors, and herders united amid migrations and wars, but their original culture hasn't survived. Most of what we know about them comes from Egyptian sources, which are strongly hostile. After the expulsion of the Hyksos, the Egyptians began a new era, the 18th dynasty, the very one in which Tutankhamun lived. Maybe hatred for their oppressors helped Egypt rise to power again. Meanwhile, some Hyksos achievements were kept as part of Egyptian tradition. I'm always struck by moments like these, when the victors not only forget the defeated, but also take the very best from them. The Bavarian princess's skeleton. Archaeologists found remains of a young woman aged 1825 in Bavaria who died around 500 AD. Her burial inventory included glass bead necklaces, a gold necklace, rock crystal beads, several fibulae, and vessels. According to researchers, she belonged to the local nobility and was likely a princess. After the Roman Empire fell, the Bavarian tribe formed in southern modern Germany and nearby areas. However, it appears in written sources only by the mid-6th century. The Bavarians likely formed from remnants of Celtic and Roman populations, Alemannic and Frankish tribes, and other Germanic mercenaries serving Rome. Although there are other hypotheses in which the Bavarians are considered migrants from Bohemia. Archaeologist Alois Speletter noted that the girl belonged to the local nobility and can rightfully be called a princess. According to researchers, the early medieval necropolis began to be used around the year 500 AD. This dating is confirmed by a vessel shaped like late antique examples, but decorated in the Germanic style. A bird-shaped fibula next to it also confirms the grave's age. The girl clearly belonged to the elite of her society. Around her neck was a rich necklace made of glass beads, as well as a gold necklace. In the waist area, archaeologists found a rock crystal bead, which usually is seen as part of an unmarried young woman's costume and has an almandine brooch. a pyramid that sank before history. Near Yonaguni Island, at a depth of 30 meters on the ocean floor, lies a stone pyramid. Even the steps, terraces, arches, and openings appear constructed, not like random rocks. The object is around 10,000 years old, predating the Sumerians, Egyptians, and the earliest cities. Scientists disagree. Some see Yonaguni as a natural formation, while others think it's evidence of a lost civilization. If they're right, it could completely change our understanding of when and how human history began. What if this isn't just a mistaken trace of history, but a trace of some civilization? What if there's a history hidden beneath this ocean that we don't know about? What happened to the Neanderthals? They lived in Europe and Asia long before us, strong, resilient, and well adapted to the cold. We're used to thinking that Neanderthals were something like dumb cavemen, but that's not true at all. They had a larger brain volume than we do. They made tools, used fire, buried their dead, and cared for the wounded. Evidence shows they played early flutes and wore shells as decoration. Neanderthals were not beasts, but a fully developed human species, much like us. But about 40,000 years ago, they disappeared, and it's still unclear why. There are three main theories: assimilation, they mixed with Cro-Magnons, and now part of their genes lives in us. Genocide, our ancestors eradicated them over resources and climate. A sharp cooling began, which Neanderthals couldn't handle because they didn't make clothes or build shelters. Likely all of the above. Some died, some vanished. In us. Assimilation. Does that mean remembering or forgetting? There's one thing in this story that gets to me. They were almost like us, but something kept them from surviving. An ancient Tibetan scroll repository. Sakya Monastery, an ancient site in Tibet, is 180 kilometers from Everest, at 4,300 meters altitude. In 2003, it became known to the general public thanks to an amazing discovery. Archaeologists found an ancient cache of handwritten texts sealed inside a monastery wall. The monastery was founded in 1073 by Konchog Gyalpo, a monk from a prominent family and one of the first 7 Tibetans ordained as Buddhist monks. The abbots of this monastery ruled Tibet until the 13th century, supported by the Mongol Yuan dynasty. Accordingly, Sakya became the administrative center of Tibet, and the local Buddhist tradition became the dominant one in Tibet. This continued until 1959, when China took over Tibet, and the abbot of the monastery was forced to flee to India, where he built a monastery in the city of Dehradun and became its abbot. But let's go back to Sakya. The monastery houses a unique library of ancient handwritten books with beautiful illustrations. Most of the manuscripts are dedicated to Buddhism. In 2003, researchers were surprised to find a large, sealed storage of ancient scrolls and books inside a monastery wall. The storage size is impressive, with the wall measuring about 18 meters long and 3 meters high. It was literally packed with ancient texts. Some were stored as scrolls and some as books. In addition, a large number of texts were kept in cases. Chinese researchers are still working on the manuscripts from the cache. There are reportedly about 84,000 hidden manuscripts and scrolls. They are dedicated to Buddhism, history, astronomy, mathematics, and the arts. Some religious texts are written with ink containing gold and silver, and mostly belong to the Yuan and Ming periods. Some particularly valuable manuscripts were written during Khan Kubilay's 13th century era. The monastery's library houses many monuments with invaluable information on history, chronology, geography, medicine, and more. They're all stored on the shelves in the huge hall Lakan Chenpo, creating an epic scene. Here is a unique ancient cannon weighing about 500 kilograms, considered the largest and heaviest in the world. Who built the pyramids? They've stood for over 4,500 years, hundreds of tons, millions of stone blocks, exact angles, majestic, almost alien. The pyramids of Giza still remain a symbol of eternity and mystery. But the main question is simple. How? Modern archaeology presents various versions. One version says blocks were quarried and transported on sledges over wet sand. Another claims They were made on site from limestone and clay, essentially ancient concrete. French engineer Joseph Davidovets presented his own geopolymer stone formula. Even considering these hypotheses, we lack a precise answer. It's more than just technology. The scale is the mystery. Building the Pyramid of Khufu required around 2 to 3 million blocks. Even with perfect organization of labor, that's decades of work and thousands of workers. Remember, this was the ancient world. No cranes, steel, or electricity. The internal shafts are precisely aligned, and the pyramid's sides nearly match the 4 cardinal directions. And there are other questions too. Why were these tombs necessary? Why are all 3 Giza pyramids aligned with the stars of Orion's belt? Why do some blocks show traces of processing that look more like melting than cutting? The more I read about the pyramids, the more I think they're more than just structures. A future for us. Until we know exactly how they were built, we won't know why either. Jade cicada. Before you is a jade cicada created during the Western Zhou dynasty. This artifact is not just an ornament. It had deep symbolic meaning. In Chinese culture, the cicada was considered a symbol of rebirth and immortality, and jade was the stone of eternity. Such a figurine might be placed in the deceased's mouth before burial, believed to aid the soul's passage to the afterlife and rebirth. The red paint traces on the artifact are significant, as red symbolized protection and good luck. The skill of ancient Chinese craftsmen. Pay attention to the eyes, the folded paws, and the patterns that give the figurine an almost mystical appearance. Such items were part of rituals and reflected the religious beliefs of people of that era. Excavations at the biblical city of Ser. The team of archaeologists, after a year-long break, continued excavations on the Golan Heights. They are exploring 2 areas of Vivseda. The ancient fishing village is mentioned several times in the New Testament as the city where Jesus lived and where he miraculously fed a multitude of people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. The archaeologists said that the size, wealth, and impressive fortifications indicate that Ser was indeed a major city. After archaeologists identified the ancient Vivseda nearly 30 years ago, masses of Christian pilgrims visited the city because of its great importance to Christianity. Excavations have been ongoing in Vivseda for many years. They are being conducted in the area of the Jordan Park to the northeast of the Sea of Galilee. Another discovery was made in the last 2 weeks. Archaeologists have discovered the ruins of a Roman temple built by Herod Philip, which he dedicated to Julia, the daughter of Augustus. Archaeologists found coins, beads, jugs, house keys, and a Roman soldier's shield in the temple. A significant find was a coin dated to 1935 before Christ. Minted in Acca to mark Cleopatra and Mark Antony's arrival, only 12 of these coins have been discovered. Over the years, discoveries of global significance have been made here. A few years ago, a gold coin was found with the portrait of the Roman Emperor Antoninus Pius, who ruled from 138 to 161 AD. Armor bicycle. In May 2008, University of Bristol, archaeologists excavated Chateau Gaillard Castle. Iron objects forming warriors' protective armor were found at a depth of 2.5 meters. Nearby, archaeologists also discovered a well-preserved horse skeleton, denier Tournois coins from Philip II Augustus's reign, and coins from the Duchy of Aquitaine were found in the excavation, allowing the armor to be dated to Richard I the Lionheart's reign. What was unusual about this find was the arrangement of the iron armor fragments. From above, they resembled the outline of a bicycle. Imagine the archaeologist's astonishment when, after carefully extracting the fragments and cleaning off centuries-old layers of soil, they were able to examine them in detail. Without a doubt, these were parts of a knight's bicycle that had lain in the ground for almost 9 centuries. During the Hallstatt period, basic ironworking skills appeared in Europe, along with rare efforts to make steel blades by carburizing and hardening the iron. In the subsequent Latin period, the technology of steel production was fully mastered, including rather complex methods of producing welded parts with a high-quality surface resistant to friction. Metallographic study of iron parts and the method of microscopic examination of polished sections allow us to confidently say that the main structural elements of this unusual medieval bicycle are made of steel. As shown, steel-making recipes remain nearly unchanged throughout the Roman era and influenced early medieval European blacksmithing. Scientists gradually reconstructed the look of this unique knightly era vehicle. Who paid for the revolution? In 1917, the Russian Empire falls. Power shifts to the Bolsheviks, Lenin, Trotsky, with new slogans and orders. It all appears spontaneous, the people's will and mass uprising. But one question still remains without a clear answer. Who paid for this? Officially, it is believed that the Bolsheviks were financed through party dues, donations, and help from sympathizers. But this does not explain the scale. Publishing newspapers, renting buildings, weapons, logistics, transporting leaders and security, all of this requires money, a lot of money. Where did it come from? There's a theory about German funding. Some say the Kaiser's general staff wanted to destabilize Russia and remove it from the war. They reportedly funded Lenin, arranged sealed train cars from Switzerland, and protected him. Many indirect sources support this version, but there are no direct documents, or they were destroyed. Another theory involves the West. Bankers, Wall Street, the English, and old believers. They say the revolution helped those seeking to topple the old order and build a new controlled chaos. Names like Jakob Schiv, Olaf, Ashberg, and Morgenthau are mentioned, but evidence remains scarce. Everything falls apart into hints and coincidences. Strangely, even after 100 years, we still don't know for sure how one of the century's biggest political changes was funded. We know who walked the streets and seized the palaces, but not who printed the leaflets or funded the trains. Perhaps revolution is more than a clash of ideas. It's also about hidden money and those skilled at predicting the future. I'm not sure which mystery matters most, but I do know real history isn't found in textbooks. It emerges from fragments, chance discoveries, and odd coincidences. We may not find all the answers, but just asking the right questions can already make a difference. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, everyone.